I once loved him as if he were the only man in the world. But I was wrong. Terribly wrong, Cindy Landon said in her first interview after 30 years of silence. In 2025, at the age of 62, the widow of television legend Michael Landon, once celebrated across America as a symbol of morality and the ideal father from Little House on the Prairie, finally broke her silence. She recounted the years of being controlled, manipulated, and forced to live within the image he created for the world. To believe in a gentle, flawless man who always smiled in front of the cameras. No one could have imagined that behind the image of the nation's father, admired by millions of American families, was a domineering, cold, and controlling husband. And now Cindy has finally spoken out, revealing how that 28-year-old young woman once stepped into Michael Landon's life, and the heavy price she paid for what she thought was destined love. Because, as she admitted, the truth is far more frightening than the public ever imagined. I never meant to take someone's husband, but when he held my hand, I knew I had stepped into a place with no way back. Cindy Landon's voice trembled as she said those words during her exclusive interview with Vanity Scene in early 2025. Then she fell silent, looking down at her hands as if still feeling the weight of the past. According to her story, it all began in the summer of 1979 on the set of Little House on the Prairie in Simi Valley, California, where the sun was always bright, but the air heavy with whispers behind closed doors. At that time, Cindy was just a young wardrobe assistant, recently hired a few months earlier. "I just kept my head down and worked, trying to stay out of trouble," she said. But fate pulled her toward the man admired by all of America. Michael Landon, then 43 years old, twice divorced, and father of 7 children. At first he would smile at her every morning, sometimes pausing to ask, "How are you today?" A harmless question that still made the young woman's heart stir. Then came the evenings after filming ended when Michael would invite her to stay and check the lighting for the final scene. Gradually, those technical checks turned into personal conversations, light touches on her shoulder, and quick embraces in the shadows. Cindy recalled, "He always made me believe I was special, that I was the only one who made him feel at peace." But at that time, Landon was still living with his second wife, Lynn, and often appeared beside her in television interviews, talking about family love like a moral lesson. "It felt like someone slapped me in the face," Cindy said. "I called him and asked why he was still showing up with her if he said it was over. He went quiet for a few seconds, then said, 'You have to understand, this is Hollywood. I need to keep my image. It's only temporary.'" Those soothing words were soon followed by expensive gifts. One night, Michael came to see her with a bouquet of flowers and a set of car keys. It was a red Pontiac Firebird, which he called a reward for the person who makes me feel alive. When she hesitated to accept it, he just smiled and said, "Think of it as me investing in our future." I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I believed him. I thought he would leave everything for me. From then on, Cindy was drawn deeper into a relationship both of them knew was forbidden. She moved into a small apartment in North Hollywood where Michael would visit on weekends, always wearing sunglasses and a cap to avoid recognition. I believed everything he said. He promised he would divorce, that he'd make our relationship public, that once filming was over, he would end things with Lynn. But Hollywood never let secrets stay buried for long. In November 1979, a journalist from the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, Richard Lawson, received a tip that the nation's father was secretly involved with a crew member. He followed Michael for weeks until he captured a photo of him and Cindy leaving a restaurant in West Hollywood at midnight. The image was blurry, but it was enough to ignite the media frenzy. When the paper hit the stands, the entire Little House crew buzzed with gossip. One actress recalled, "No one dared mention it in front of Michael, but everyone knew how angry he was." Cindy, on the other hand, was met with cold stares. "I heard them whisper behind my back, 'Who does she think she is, touching America's hero?'" The pressure grew heavier, but Michael kept reassuring her, even taking her away to Lake Tahoe to get away from the curious. It was there that Cindy discovered she was pregnant. "I was terrified, but also happy. I thought it was a sign he would finally keep his word." But Michael's reaction was a shock. According to Cindy, he sat frozen for a few minutes, then quietly said, "No, you have to end this." Cindy thought she had misheard, but he repeated, "No one can know. I have 7 children, a family. Do you want to destroy all of that?" She said tears filled her eyes as he stood up and walked away. In the days that followed, Michael avoided her completely. No calls, no visits. Cindy was removed from the filming schedule. That's when I realized I was nothing more than a secret to be hidden. The tension reached its peak when Lynn, Michael's legal wife, found out. A crew member recalled, "She came to the set like a storm, threw a bottle against the wall and screamed, 'You've destroyed this family!'" The production had to shut down for 2 days. The story quickly spread across the press. People magazine ran the headline, "Michael Landon separates after rumored relationship with young assistant." NBC reportedly called him in to warn about the impact on his wholesome image. Public opinion split. Some defended him, others condemned him, but everyone wanted the truth. To escape the media storm, Landon took Cindy to Santa Fe, New Mexico, under the pretense of a writing retreat. In reality, it was an escape. During that time, Cindy gave birth to their first daughter. There was no announcement, no congratulations. He didn't come to the hospital. "I gave birth in silence with only one nurse who knew," she whispered. 2 years later, after the public pressure faded, Michael returned to Malibu and announced his marriage to Cindy in 1983. The wedding was quiet, held in a small garden behind their home, attended only by a few close friends. No flowers, no cameras, just a ceremony to turn a condemned relationship into something lawful. But those who knew Michael understood this wasn't the beginning of happiness, but a way to end a scandal. After the wedding, Michael appeared on television smiling, saying, "Cindy is the best thing that ever happened to me." Meanwhile, under the flashing lights, Cindy could only force a smile. "I thought I had beaten fate," she said, "but in truth, I had just stepped into a golden cage with the key in his hands." That story, seemingly ending with a wedding photo on the Malibu shore, was actually the beginning of a nearly decade-long tragedy where fame, love, and control slowly merged until Cindy no longer recognized herself. "I was deceived. I walked into the wolf's den thinking it was the home of love." Cindy Landon's voice lowered, her eyes gazing toward the ocean as she spoke those words in her 2025 interview. Even after more than 40 years, she still remembered every detail. The scent of the sea breeze, the golden light in their Malibu mansion, and the creeping chill in her heart even as he smiled. But only she knew that behind those walls, every day felt like holding her breath. And every night she wondered, was she truly living or just existing in the role of the perfect man's wife? When they married in February 1983, Cindy truly believed it was a new beginning. "He told me, 'All the noise is behind us now, it's just you and me.'" And in the early days, everything did feel like a dream. Every morning, Michael would wake early, brew her favorite coffee, an Americano with little ice and 2 teaspoons of brown sugar, and place the Los Angeles Times on the tray, marking the articles written about him. In the evenings, they dined on the patio with the Pacific wind brushing through the curtains, while he talked about new projects, upcoming scripts, and dreams they would pursue together. "I believed him. I thought for the first time he was truly happy." But only a few months later, the cracks began to show. Small, fine ones, yet enough to unsettle her. Michael slowly began to control everything: her calls, her schedule, even the people she could meet. He told me, "Don't go out alone, don't talk to journalists. They'll hurt you. I don't want you to be hurt the way I was." At first, Cindy took it as care and protection, but soon it became a set of rules she could never break. Each morning, she found a note stuck to the refrigerator. Breakfast time, cleaning time, exercise time, and at the bottom, in his handwriting, "Don't go anywhere when I'm not home." She said, "I don't know when I started asking for permission to do everything. I'd ask to go to the market, to call my mother, to cut my hair. I didn't realize I was slowly losing my freedom." Sometimes even the smallest thing could freeze the air in the house. Once, when Cindy returned home 10 minutes late after stopping by a grocery store in Pacific Palisades, Michael slammed the landline phone onto the floor shattering its battery cover. He didn't say a word. He just looked at her in silence, then walked out to the porch. He didn't yell, didn't hit me. He was just silent. And that silence terrified me, Cindy recalled. She learned to read his moods from tiny details. How he folded the newspaper, how fast he drank his coffee, the sound of his footsteps down the hallway. When the press began revisiting his past divorces, Michael grew angry. He called it media garbage and forbade Cindy from reading any papers that mentioned him. "I don't want you to see those lies," he said. Yet, every morning he read them himself before tossing the paper into the trash. "I saw him fighting the world," Cindy said, "and I got pulled into that fight without even realizing it." By 1985, Cindy wanted to return to work as a makeup artist, just a few small projects in Santa Monica. But Michael strongly objected. "I didn't marry a wife for people to see her carrying a makeup kit on set," he said. She stayed silent, gave up the chance, and gradually stopped thinking about her career. Each day she stayed home cleaning, cooking, waiting for him to return. Dinner had to be ready before 8. The wine glass half full, the tablecloth perfectly smooth. "I lived through the details," she said, "because one tiny mistake could make the whole house collapse." Michael had a way of making everyone believe he was always right. He would say, "I'm not controlling you. I'm protecting you." But over time, Cindy realized he didn't want to protect. He wanted to possess. "I was no longer the woman he loved. I was an ornament in the picture he painted of himself." Rumors of Michael's new relationships began to surface in the late 1980s. A Star magazine photographer captured him having dinner at the Beverly Hills Hotel with a young reporter. When Cindy showed him the paper, Michael looked up from his coffee, his voice low and cold. "Never bring this up again. Do you know how fast I can make you disappear from Hollywood?" After that sentence, Cindy understood he was no longer afraid of losing her. He was only afraid of losing his image. In the following years, their Malibu home grew unbearably quiet. No music, no laughter, only the sound of waves and his footsteps on the wooden floor. Cindy's friends drifted away. Calls stopped coming. Letters stopped arriving. "He didn't even have to forbid me anymore. I had already withdrawn from the world myself," she said. "I knew that if I left, he'd destroy me with a single phone call." On television, Michael kept smiling, talking about his beloved wife and happy family in Malibu. Magazines still called them Hollywood's golden couple. And every time Cindy saw herself beside him in those photos, she could only smile faintly. "I saw a woman who looked like me, but she wasn't me anymore." She lived inside her husband's script, a role written for her with memorized lines and a practiced smile. "I lost my own voice," she said. "I forgot what it felt like to be myself." The Malibu mansion still stood glowing under the California sun, but to Cindy, it was nothing more than a gilded cage. She said that some nights when Michael was away, she sat alone on the porch listening to the waves crash against the shore, whispering to herself, "Please, just give me one day where I don't have to act anymore." And as the wind faded, she realized she was only speaking to the emptiness. "I loved him," Cindy said softly, "but that love cost me everything." Because behind the closed doors of the Malibu house, it wasn't just one woman suffering. On set, the colleagues who once worked with Michael Landon had also begun to see it clearly. The man America worshipped on screen was in reality someone entirely different. And it was there, under the glare of the studio lights, that the darker side of this Hollywood legend began to emerge. "He didn't just control me, he controlled everyone. On set, Michael wasn't my husband. He was a god, and anyone who defied him was erased." Those were Cindy Landon's words in her final interview with Vanity Scene. Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't angry, just calm, steady, as if reciting a tragedy far too old. Yet every sentence cut through the mythic wall surrounding the name Michael Landon. From the late 1970s to 1984, while Hollywood called him America's father and NBC hailed him as television's golden asset, Michael Landon was quietly building an empire of his own. He wrote, directed, produced, and starred in Little House on the Prairie, the show that made millions of American families cry every Monday night. But behind the studio walls at Universal, The name Michael Landon made many shudder. Karen Grassel, who played Ma, the gentle mother of the show, once told Entertainment Weekly, "Michael wasn't the man people saw on screen. He could be charming, funny, but he could also be cruel in an instant." Grassel recalled one morning in 1981 when she asked for a raise after 7 seasons. Michael sat still, lifted his head, and said word for word, "You're not important enough to be paid more." Then he stood up, called the scriptwriter over, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Next episode cut half of Ma Ingalls' scenes. The audience doesn't need her that much anyway." For months, Karen was pushed aside. Her lines were shortened. Her presence diminished while Michael cracked off-color jokes about women during breaks. A lighting technician once told People magazine, "He liked to curse to brag about his conquests. Every time a woman walked by, he'd laugh loudly just to remind everyone who ran the place." But no one dared to challenge him because Michael wasn't just an actor. He controlled everything. Salaries, screen time, even who stayed or left the show. A crew member recalled that every time he walked onto the set, the air seemed to tighten. People would glance at each other, then fall silent. One complaint, and you could be gone by morning. In 1983, when NBC decided to end Little House on the Prairie after nearly a decade, Michael erupted in fury. He saw it as betrayal, a slap to the ego he'd spent years crafting. "No one touches my legacy," he snapped at the executive producer during a closed meeting at Universal. According to actor Dean Butler, who played Almanzo Wilder that afternoon, Michael gathered the entire crew and declared, "If they want it to end, I'll end it my way." And he did. In the final episode, The Last Farewell, he wrote the script so that the entire town of Walnut Grove, the beloved setting for 10 years, was blown to pieces. Some on the team protested, but he dismissed them. "No one else gets to reuse it. I want them to remember that this place ends with me." That scene was filmed in the scorching California summer of 1984. When the explosion went off, the whole set, every house, every street, was destroyed in a storm of dust and fire. A prop assistant recalled Michael stood there with his arms crossed, eyes unblinking. Not happy, not sad, just empty, like he'd burned a piece of his own life. After Little House ended, Michael immediately launched his new project, Highway to Heaven. On TV, he played a kind-hearted angel helping people in need. But for the crew, it was heaven in name only. A cameraman told the Los Angeles Times, "He'd make us reshoot dozens of takes because the light wasn't holy enough for the message. If anyone got tired, he said they lacked faith." Every disagreement was an insult to him. One day, when a young crew member misadjusted a camera angle, Michael threw the script to the floor and shouted, "Without me, you're nothing." The entire set froze. That crew member was fired by the end of the day. Those who worked with Michael said he had two sides: a gifted storyteller and a man obsessed with control. He could laugh and pat your shoulder in the morning, and by noon erase your role from the script. No one ever knew what he was really thinking. One team member said they only knew that if he wasn't happy, everyone held their breath. Meanwhile, Cindy, his young wife at home, saw it all from a distance. "Every night, he came home smelling of cigarettes and the stage," she said. "He spoke to me like I was one of his actors. Every word, every line, as if he were directing my life." She remembered that when Michael once spoke about blowing up the Little House set, his eyes glimmered with something unsettling. He said, "I wanted to end it in a way no one would dare start again." That's when I understood he wasn't just burning the set. He was burning everything that didn't belong to him, even people. On television, he was an angel. But in real life, those who worked with Michael called him the man with two souls. One filled with light, and the other a bottomless darkness. Cindy ended her story with a sentence so soft it was almost a whisper, yet chilling enough to make the air stand still. They called him a legend. I called him a storm. And that storm, after tearing through everyone behind the scenes, finally came crashing down upon his own home, where Cindy was no longer a wife, but the living witness to the downfall of a man once worshipped by the entire world. People worshipped him as a saint of television, but to those who actually lived with him, Michael Landon was nothing more than a false god. A man who demanded love from everyone yet never truly knew how to love anyone. Those were the words spoken by Cindy Landon. Her tone sharp, her gaze steady, as if the hatred inside her had long since hardened into calm clarity. She spoke without tears, without excuses. Because now it wasn't only her. Even Michael's own children were beginning to share parts of the story that Hollywood had buried for decades. When Michael Landon passed away from pancreatic cancer in July 1991, America fell silent. The press called him the soul of television, the man who made a nation believe in love, family, and faith. Thousands of condolence letters poured into NBC. His image was replayed on Little House on the Prairie. The smile, the kind eyes, the gentle voice. But behind that glow, inside the homes that carried the Landon name, no one believed in that story anymore. The whole country mourned him, said Michael Landon Jr. in his 1999 documentary Michael Landon, "The father I knew, but his children didn't. We had lost him long before while he was still alive." He described his childhood as years spent in a suffocatingly silent house. Every meal felt like a scene being filmed. My father sat at the head of the table, light shining on his face. And we smiled even when we didn't want to. Everything had to be perfect, even the sound of a spoon touching a plate. When Michael left to be with Cindy, the 14-year-old boy stood by the door watching his father walk away without looking back. My mother collapsed on the floor and he just said, "I have no regrets." I don't think he ever knew what regret meant. Landon Jr. spent years swallowing his anger until after his father's death, when he finally turned his pain into film. Not for revenge, but to tell the world, the man they worshipped was not the man I called father. Leslie Landon Matthews, Michael's daughter, also spoke out in a 2015 interview with People. Her voice was soft, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. He preached compassion on screen, but at home, the moment he walked in, the air would tighten. I never cried in front of him because he said crying was weakness. Once when I was sick and just wanted comfort, he told me, "Don't let people see you weak like that." Leslie said Michael lived by rules he created, and everyone in the house had to obey. He chain-smoked, drank every night, and stayed up late watching his own shows. He called it work, she said, but I knew it was his way of escaping us. Another child, who asked not to be named, told the Los Angeles Times, "He never apologized. Even when he hurt someone, he stayed silent, as if silence itself was power. He taught us to be strong, but never taught us how to love." In his final months, the Malibu mansion fell quiet. Michael grew thin from illness, but his eyes never changed. Still, the gaze of a man used to giving orders. Cindy said that even near death, he still wanted control. When to take medicine, when the doctor could enter, how the curtains were drawn, how the light should fall. He told me to open the window because he wanted the light to hit his face. I realized then even his death had to look beautiful to others. Cindy cared for him every day, but love was long gone. Only emptiness remained, the numbness of someone who had lived too long inside lies. I cooked porridge. I bathed him. I changed the sheets. But I no longer saw him as my husband. I only saw an actor trying to finish his final scene. As his breath faded, Cindy sat beside him, holding his hand, thinking only one thing. This is the end of a man who never knew when to stop. He looked at her lips, moving as if to speak, but she didn't want to hear it. "I didn't cry," Cindy said. "Not because I wasn't sad, but because I had run out of tears long ago." After his death, Hollywood immortalized him. A man of virtue, kindness, and family values. But at the same time, another version of him began to surface from the very people who shared his name. They spoke of a controlling father, a distant husband, a director lost in his own illusion. Landon Jr. said bluntly in his documentary, "My father made the whole world believe he was good. He made them cry, made them believe in love and forgiveness. But he never lived that truth, not for a single day." Leslie added a single line, short but deeply painful. "I loved my father, but I never knew who he really was." After 30 years of silence, Cindy Landon ended it all with a weary but resolute voice. "I'm not protecting him anymore. I'm protecting myself and the child he once wanted to erase." She lifted her head, looked straight into the camera, and without a tear spoke slowly. People can build statues, write thousands of praises, but to those who truly knew him, Michael Landon wasn't an angel. He was a performance, and that performance at last has ended. To the public, Michael Landon remains an icon of kindness. But to those who saw behind the curtain, he was a man who turned love into dialogue, family into props, and the hearts of those who loved him into the unseen stage of a role that was never real. The story of Michael Landon isn't just the tragedy of a man consumed by his own fame. It's a warning that the glow of admiration can make us forget the darkness quietly growing within. If you believe this truth deserves to be heard, share this story so the world understands that behind Hollywood's perfect smiles, there are lives quietly suffocating beneath the weight of lies.